wanted to talk about distance to empty. And what distance to empty means is basically your range estimation to empty in EV cars. You know how in petrol cars there is a bit of an estimate number in the newer models that have some sort of mileage computer and stuff that says basically distance to empty tank is 200-300 kilometers. Well, in EV2 there is a distance to empty, which is basically also known as your range. And I wanted to talk about how range is calibrated, the different sort of rating systems there are, and just about how to improve efficiency in an EV. So let's begin with the different standardized numbers. The top three most sought out numbers, advertised numbers in Nepal, is basically NEDC, and then you have ARAI, and then you have WLTP, which is another range estimator. And the thing is, these companies, institutes, really do this standardized range test, like a test, in a very, very sanitized way, where it's almost on a treadmill in no inclinations, very minimal amount of cooling and heating, very nominal amount of acceleration in a very very moderate manner to maximize how much range can be found. And as a result, this is done in different situations in highway driving and in urban city area driving, where EVs give very different ranges. As a result, the same car, I test drove a Series 3, the NEDC estimate of that car is 430 kilometers in a single charge, whereas the WLTP, which I feel personally is a bit more realistic, is about 310. I'm forgetting the exact figures, and that's such a big difference, 100 km difference in range estimations. I'm thinking, you gave a math test to your teacher as a kid, right? And you give it to two different teachers. One gives you a 20 on 20, another gives you a 15. But the thing is, your mark sheet is the same, but the marking is very different, basically. And then you have ARAI, which is, again, India's own governmental institution that does its own tests. There's so many different flooded information consumers are getting at the same time when they search range estimation of a Kona EV. And on top of all of that, the thing everyone has to keep in mind is our traffic in Nepal is very unique. Our roads are very unique. They're bumpy, it's slow traffic most of the time. Our roads have potholes, they're not always pitched smoothly. Uphills and downhills are quite significant in Kathmandu. Like any other city, if you've traveled Delhi, other big cities, New York, Washington DC, Berlin, big cities I'm thinking about, Tokyo, they're mainly flat. Kathmandu though is very unique, historical, cultural, and big roads, small roads, uphills, downhills, they're everywhere in town. You know how it is. And as a result, range calibration in Nepal is also a very interesting thing, and you can't always follow the range. I think the Hyundai estimated range on this car is 306 or 312 km on a full charge, but I get in the summers 388, and in the winters it drops to about 360, 368, 370, which is way beyond what was sold. And that brings me to my second point. How do you maximize and tweak the range in these cars? And basically my one-stop solution to that is just don't floor your car anymore. I know that doesn't sound fun at all, because you have an EV, you have an abundance of instant torque at any time, and I'm asking you not to use it. But that is how you maximize range in an EV. You take the accelerator very slow with a feather foot, tap it and just hold on to it. Just tap it and hold on to it, nothing more. And because EVs have such a linear pull to them, unlike a petrol, gas, diesel engine. It'll continuously pull at the same force all the way. And it just tapers off at the high end, like when you're at 120 kph maybe. But until then, it'll just pull like at the same amount. Whereas in a petrol car, there are certain bandwidths of RPM, anywhere between 1500 if you have like a turbocharged petrol engine, to, I don't know, on the high end 5,000-6,000. The sweet spot basically is what everyone calls it, where the torque is the highest in these gasoline engine cars. And so the initial grunt is not as much as that sweet mid spot, and then again it tapers off the higher you go. And so as a result, the one thing you, like, drivers, users of any EV vehicle needs to pay in mind is, you know how in gasoline bikes and cars, the more you rev it, the more you throttle, the more you put your foot down on the gas, the more thirsty your engine becomes, because it's like burning more fuel, producing more power, combusting more, and like spinning the wheel faster. It's the same thing in the EV, but it's like tenfold instantaneous and like sensitive. Like if I suddenly drive the next 1 minute with a heavy foot instead of a light foot, it'll immediately reflect it on my instrument panel. Immediately the efficiency on an EV, the mileage basically, will jump up by like 4 or 5, and my range will like immediately drop down by like 10, 15, 20. And there are also other things that affect range just as instantaneously, unlike in a gasoline engine, and that is heating. Oh boy. Heating and driving modes. Not driving mode as much as heating and cooling though. EV motors don't produce too much heat, and they need to spend a lot of energy and power on like condensing air that is pulled in from the front AC intake. There's no engine air intake, by the way, in this car, because it's an EV car. It doesn't need air for like combustion. It's electrical energy that runs the motors, but it does need an air intake in front for the AC condenser. Air is pulled in, it's condensed a lot. There are these condensers in the engine bay, and then cool air is like spit out on this end, and of course it's also filtered. There's an AC filter just like in regular cars. And so what happens is, as a result, that condensing part takes a lot of energy in these cars, especially heating. Like heating will take, if not regularly, a lot more of energy than compared to cooling. I usually get, when I turn on heating, it's usually like a 40-50 km reduction in my range versus like a 20-30 when I have AC on. And depending on the fan speed, high, it consumes more energy. The range estimation drops down. Depending on how cold or hot I want it, the more extreme the temperature, the more range drops down. And so these things are very sensitive, these EV cars, and range just goes up and down. And the thing about this is, there's a range estimate that is shown on your dashboard, but a lot of EV owners, especially abroad, they don't call this a range estimate. You know what they call this? They call this a guess-o-meter. Like, it supposedly guesses based on your energy consumption how much range you can possibly get, and it reflects that number. But the only true range estimation is when you calculate on a charge, a certain charge, how many kilowatts is consumed, and you check your odometer after that. How many kilometers did you actually travel? Not the guess-o-meter on the side of the car that most dashboards have. The actual how many kilometers did you travel. Honestly, even I don't do that. For me, as long as I see like a 3-digit number or a 2-digit number above 50 km, 50 km and below is when I really get like a bit anxious in terms of range. Above 50 km, I don't really care. I usually charge my car anywhere between 80 to 120 km depending on how much I need to use the car the next day. And so as a result, I don't really care how much that. It's just like a mental thing at this point, like a placebo effect, I guess. As long as my range estimate gives a decent number, I feel like I'm at ease. I don't ever feel stricken for range and I need to like quickly go home and plug in, unless I really need to use the car a lot, which sometimes does happen, by the way. A full charge usually takes I have a slow grinding charger at home, so that usually takes a good 14-15 hours for a full charge from like 0 to 100. But I've never done that, honestly, in my 41,000 kilometers of driving. It's always, I charge above 20% usually. There's only one time I've driven it down to like 40 km. That's what the Guessometer showed. And by the next morning, it had gone up to like 200, but it still hadn't reached the full charge. So I came home that day again from work and again charged it for a full charge. Regen really also plays a big help in this. The more you let your car coast and the more you let your car recuperate that kinetic energy back into the battery, it also slows you down. And yeah, just how gentle foot you can pamper your EV, it'll give you that much in returns for range, honestly. And you're already saving a lot by driving an EV versus a gasoline, but if you want to X out your fuel/electricity savings, there's always a way. And let me know how that goes about the Guessometer and your predicted range and everything. I know some companies have done it better than other companies in town, but then again, it's also your driving. Like I told you, my personal experience was I got way beyond the claimed range on this Hyundai Kona, and I'm quite happy that they underestimated the range estimate for me and I ended up getting way more. But anyway, drop a comment if you have anything else to add on or question, and I'll see you on the next vlog.